Today we're looking at Britain's stunning shift toward full militarization, funded not by growth but by the biggest tax squeeze in modern history. We'll examine how Chancellor Rachel Reeves is extracting billions from middle-class families despite promising moderation. We'll connect this to broader EU patterns, explore what's driving this sudden military expansion without any concrete threat, and reveal how defense contractors are profiting while ordinary citizens face economic collapse. And trust me, I've saved the most intriguing piece for the very end. Years ago, I worked inside one of those big, respected media organizations. You know the ones. I watched editors reshape stories, bury inconvenient truths, twist facts to serve a predetermined narrative. Eventually, I realized I had a choice, loyalty to the machine or loyalty to the truth. I chose truth. I walked away. Now I operate independently, answer to no one, and I bring you the analysis that matters, the connections they don't want you to see. Right now, I need your support more than ever. If you find value in what we do here, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you're able, consider becoming a sponsor. We put in serious work fact-checking every claim, verifying every detail, making sure you never get fed propaganda disguised as news. That takes time, resources, and frankly, it takes courage in an environment where independent voices are constantly under pressure. Your support makes this possible, and please stick with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal in the final segment will completely reframe how you see this entire situation. For most of the past decade, British politics revolved around promises: rebuilding, renewing, restoring the nation. Politicians spoke endlessly about recovery, about making Britain strong again. But something fundamental has shifted. Today, a very different story is unfolding, one that almost no one in power wants to acknowledge openly. The United Kingdom is moving rapidly, aggressively, toward a full-scale militarization strategy. And here's the part that should alarm you. This isn't being funded by economic growth, not by smart investment, not by efficiency reforms. It's being financed directly, immediately, by British taxpayers through the largest, most punishing tax squeeze in modern history. Now, before we dive deeper into the UK situation, let me connect the thread here. Something tells me Germany might be next. Germany is already dealing with profound economic troubles. They've already started cutting social spending. But will those cuts be enough to transform the Bundeswehr into the strongest army in Europe? Almost certainly not. So it's only reasonable to expect higher taxes rolling out across the entire European Union as militarization accelerates continent-wide. But let's bring our focus back to Britain, because what's happening there right now is extraordinary. At the center of this unfolding crisis stands Chancellor Rachel Reeves. She's the one imposing some of the heaviest tax burdens British citizens have seen in generations. And here's what makes this particularly striking. She entered office promising exactly the opposite. Some of you might remember. She promised moderation, stability, protection for working families. Those were her words. On November 26th, Reeves unveiled a sweeping new set of tax-raising measures that will stretch all the way to 2031. Think about that timeline. This isn't a temporary emergency measure. This is a long-term restructuring of Britain's entire fiscal reality. Her plan fundamentally reshapes income tax brackets. It tightens national insurance contribution rules significantly. It reduces exemptions on savings and investments. It introduces new surcharge mechanisms for high-value properties. During the campaign, she was asked directly about tax rises. Her response? No tax rises in the next parliament. No tax rises needed in the plans in our manifesto. No tax rises for working people. That's income tax, national insurance. But when pressed further, she added a very telling phrase: no plans. Let me decode that for you, because I've been around politics long enough to recognize the language. When a politician says no plans, what they actually mean is I might. It's a linguistic escape hatch, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. The Treasury estimates that this package Reeves just introduced will extract roughly £26 billion from British citizens. That's equivalent to about $34 billion. Now, you might assume the most affected group would be the ultra-wealthy, or perhaps multinational corporations dodging taxes. No surprises there, right? Of course not. The reality is far more troubling. The primary target is 1.7 million middle-class British families. Families already grappling with a cost of living crisis that refuses to fade, that keeps grinding them down month after month. Reeves defended her plan with remarkably simple messaging. In her words, ordinary citizens will have to pay just a little bit more. She described the measures as fair and necessary. But here's the question you should be asking. Necessary for what exactly? The answer is military spending. Britain is racing to push its military budget to at least 2.6% of GDP by April 2027. This aligns perfectly with NATO's demands, with Trump's demands too. Yet for all the dramatic language about insecurity, about looming threats, Reeves and her colleagues have offered almost no concrete explanation of what justifies this sudden militarization, this unprecedented tax burden. There's been no intelligence release, no specific national security revelation, no evidence whatsoever of an imminent attack on Britain that would justify militarization at this extraordinary scale. Instead, the government speaks in vague, shadowy generalities, and this pattern is strikingly similar to what we're seeing from other governments across the EU. In other words, fear has become the basis for fiscal policy, for economic policy, and more specifically in this case, for massive tax hikes. Fear without evidence, fear without transparency, just fear. But here's where things get even more intriguing. Analysts across the entire political spectrum have reacted harshly to Reeves's tax hikes. Many have warned that these new rules will slash social benefits, eat away at personal savings, and dramatically increase financial pressure on average households. There's talk of heavier taxation on investments, new restrictions on pension-related tax relief, the Office for Budget Responsibility projects that the average tax burden on British citizens will jump at least 38% in the coming years. Let that sink in. 38%. That's not an adjustment. That's not a minor policy tweak. That is a fundamental transformation of Britain's economic reality. It's wealth redistribution, if you will, straight from the pockets of the middle class, directly into the coffers of the military-industrial complex. Now, some of you may recall that Reeves actually ran for office promising Labour would not raise taxes on ordinary workers. That was a central campaign pledge. But like so many Western governments right now, campaign promises have been discarded, thrown out entirely in favour of alignment with NATO's military expansion agenda. The British public is being told to sacrifice their economic stability, their savings, their futures, because of what amounts to an imaginary, completely unfounded fear campaign run by the majority of EU elites. And what's the result? British citizens are paying significantly more in taxes. Their standard of living is deteriorating in real time. Meanwhile, defence contractors and arms manufacturers are enjoying record profits. They're sitting on multi-billion-dollar contract backlogs right now. Think about the human dimension here for a moment. Middle-class families and low-income earners are in survival mode, cutting back on essentials, worried about heating bills, about groceries, about whether they can afford their children's education. And simultaneously, billions of pounds are being funneled into military projects, into funding conflicts, into supporting regime change operations, into arms shipments. The contrast couldn't be starker. Here's something most people miss about this militarization push. The more the UK ramps up defense spending, stages NATO exercises across Europe, positions military assets offensively near Russia's borders, the more Moscow feels compelled to ramp up its own defense preparations. We are already in what is effectively a new arms race, and it's just about to get significantly worse. The EU elites either don't understand or they refuse to acknowledge that these economic policies are the direct result of their own failures as policymakers. These policies are destabilizing not only international relations, but also the social fabric of their own states. And that brings us to a critical point about consequences. Mass tax hikes combined with social spending cuts, all with unclear justification, won't go unnoticed. It's impossible. There's going to be backlash. And frankly, there should be backlash. Backlash against militarization for militarization's sake. Backlash against fear tactics used to justify economic hardship. Backlash against the consistent lack of any strategy to support peaceful diplomatic initiatives. And backlash against this relentless drive to fund more destruction, more conflict in Ukraine, in Russia, and elsewhere around the globe. For Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, the stakes could not be higher right now. Labour may have won a landslide victory in 2024, but public support is slipping rapidly. The more people understand what's actually happening, the more anger builds. Keir Starmer has become extremely unpopular. So has Reeves. Meanwhile, Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, appears to be rising steadily in the polls, and it's becoming quite clear that if the government continues down this path, down this self-destructive trajectory, the outcome is very predictable. inevitable. There will be protests, there will be anger in the streets, there will be political upheaval, because at some point citizens have to draw a line in the sand and refuse to finance a militarization agenda they never voted for in the first place, that they never even supported. Yet it's being pushed relentlessly over and over again, and we're seeing identical trends in many countries across the EU. So, what are we likely looking at? More economic instability, worsening political crises within the UK, and of course across the EU in general. Add to that mounting social grievances, deepening inequality, and what you have is a perfect storm, a fire that will become impossible to put out. So let me bring this all together for you. Britain is undergoing a profound transformation, one that's being sold as necessary, defense spending, but is really a massive wealth transfer from ordinary families to defense contractors. The justification is fear without evidence. The cost is economic security for millions. The political consequences are already becoming visible. Starmer's government is losing legitimacy. Alternative parties are gaining ground. And the broader pattern across Europe suggests this is just the beginning. If you found this analysis valuable, I genuinely need you to take action right now. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you're in a position to support independent journalism, please consider sponsoring this channel. We're committed to bringing you verified information, to connecting dots that mainstream outlets won't touch, to asking the questions that need to be asked. Your support makes that possible in an environment where independent voices face constant pressure. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's really happening in Britain and across Europe right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you make of these tax hikes? Do you see this militarization trend as justified, or does it feel like manufactured crisis? Drop your comments below. And as always, thank you for being here, for thinking critically, for refusing to accept surface-level narratives. I'll see you in the next one.